Welcome back, everyone. I'm Davin Chitwood here with Kirkham Tech, and I have our CEO here as well, Tom Kirkham. And today, I had a question about IT and cybersecurity for nonprofits. And I was curious on your thoughts on this, but what are some critical cybersecurity best practices that nonprofits should implement to protect like sensitive data or just overall their entire infrastructure?
Oh, that's a great question. And many of the same things that we preach to for-profit businesses, or I preach or evangelize, but they're the same. The best practices about installing artificial intelligence-based defensive technical solutions, to replace antivirus, and use multi-factor authentication wherever possible, use a password manager and make sure everybody is not reusing passwords and not sharing credentials with anyone. These are best practices that we've covered in practically every video on YouTube, right? But when it comes to nonprofits, and we've done a lot of nonprofits, we do a lot of nonprofits. It's part of our core values to sponsor nonprofit organizations. And one of the things that commonly comes up is that their donor list that give to the organization needs to be kept extremely private. For one reason is many of these donors are high net worth individuals. And we've talked about that and the special needs that high net worth individuals have. And the last thing as a nonprofit that you want to have happen is you're compromised. And then the next thing you know, these individuals are compromised because you can be a threat vector to those individuals, right? You're a trusted source of emails and all sorts of things. And they trust you enough to donate their time, money, and energy to help your organization. And so you got to cue in on that. Now, some of the nonprofits are women's shelters that we deal with, and others that have sensitive data that they do not want to get compromised. Whether, it's the people that are benefiting from the charity, that needs to be kept private as well. Not to mention the regular stuff. And this is true for everybody, but the problem with nonprofits is they often have such a tight budget that they spend the minimum amount of money on IT and they spend the minimum amount of money on security. And first of all, I'd like to say that an IT is an investment in the productivity and efficiency of your nonprofit, just like it is in any business. And there's a certain amount you should be spending. And I know that everyone that's listening that has a nonprofit has a group of peers they talk to. And you need to find out what that benchmark, how much should you be budgeting for IT and cybersecurity? And you need to get to that benchmark. So you're maximizing your return on investment. And once you know that number, it may be a percentage of revenue or the number of employees or whatever it may be. Once you know that number, then you need to set aside 10% of that to invest in cybersecurity. And those numbers work pretty good for just about everyone. So if you're dramatically underspending, then you're not realizing the return on investment. If you run the computers in the ground or you use donated computers, that costs your organization money, period. That's it in a nutshell. That is not an efficient way to invest in IT. And furthermore, don't make the mistake of thinking maybe you're a food bank or something like that, and you go, who would want to hack us? That's not what's happening out there in the real world. The majority of cyber attacks are not these big companies that are targeted. JBS Meat Supply, Colonial Pipeline, the list goes on and on. Sony Pictures, City of Atlanta. The vast majority of attacks are to small to medium-sized organizations. And the hackers don't know who you are and they don't care who you are. It's a numbers game to them, and they're spewing out maybe all the food banks in the United States. there'd be thousands and thousands of them. Probably, I mean, I don't know, but tens of thousands anyway,
Yeah.
you know? And, you know, if there's tens of thousands of food banks and they've gotten an email list of all the food banks in the United States, it's probably easy to get. And they spew out a ransomware attack via email, you know, they can make $5 or $10 million real fast. And they
Real
don't know
fast.
who you are and they don't care who you are. Not to mention phishing attacks and manipulations and just all sorts of other things that a good cybersecurity awareness program will train all of your users, all of your employees, or even your volunteers. It's going to train them on how to recognize these. Over half the breaches are caused, well, I'm sorry. If you implement a cybersecurity awareness program, you've cut your risk in half.
Mhm.
Okay. But just remember, 95% of breaches are caused by human error. All these other wonderful tools that we have and all these policies and procedures and what we call governance, those are all wonderful. But the first line, those are put in place to actually protect you against a human being letting the bad guys into the network. So, you know, it goes back to best practices. I'm sure we've talked about the 5 things, and I think we've done some videos on the 3 pillars that we follow that is somewhat unique. And we're happy to see now, I'm just going to do a little plug here, but we're happy to
Yeah.
see that NIST cybersecurity framework is included, or will include, the first of next year, will include governance. So it's not just the 5 things in NIST, it's 6 now. And frankly, all the other 5 things won't work without proper governance. And that's kind of our special sauce with our clients, is helping them understand things from a management and a leadership and organizational goals and objectives, so they can maximize their return on investment in IT and maximize their overall security, employees, donors, and the benefits, the beneficiaries of the organization.
No, that's a good point, and I want to touch on 2 things. You mentioned that relationship basically that we have with our clients, and how we focus around governance. That may be new to a lot of people listening. They may not have heard a type of relationship like that with their IT provider, and that's something that's normal for us. We call our relationship with our clients a partnership, because we want to understand exactly their goals and what's extremely valuable to them, and where the company is going. And then from an IT and security standpoint, make sure we're all on the same page to make that happen. But it starts with governance, like you were saying. Another thing you mentioned these a few times throughout the video today. If you still have antivirus, then that's job number 1. You need to switch that out for an AI-based tool. We use an EDR, or endpoint detection response tool. That's one thing that you need to implement. If you're not using MFA, multi-factor authentication, something very easy that you can start implementing for all your employees. If you don't have a continuous cybersecurity training, a very easy step that you can implement for your employees, just to cut your risk in half right away. All of these little things that we mentioned throughout the video, those are things that you need to do step by step. And if you are not really sure what you need to do or where you need to start, I would recommend having an assessment done. That's something that we do for free, and we basically evaluate what you currently have, your current practices, look for any potential vulnerabilities, and then we help you build your IT and cybersecurity infrastructure based off of that evaluation and that assessment that we've had. Real quick and easy, but it's a great starting point if you're just starting out and you need to implement new IT and cybersecurity within your organization, or if you're looking to enhance your current IT and cybersecurity infrastructure, especially going into 2024. That's something that I would highly recommend.
Yeah, and one other thing that you need to be aware of, especially I'm talking to the executive directors,
Yep.
the ones that actually run the charity, okay? You better believe that if you haven't had a board member bring it up in a meeting, you know, what's our cybersecurity defense look like? What's the risk analysis look like? Are there any compliance and regulatory issues that we need to work on and get in compliance with? If that hasn't happened yet, boards are bringing that to
Yes.
the management of the organization. So if you're an ED or whatever your head honcho title is, if you haven't had it happen to you yet, I highly recommend getting ahead of the game. Get
Yes.
at least, you know, what NIST tells us, what the cybersecurity framework tells us. If you don't understand your vulnerabilities, your weaknesses, from a cybersecurity standpoint, that's the first step. You've got to do that. You've got to see where you're screwing up, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to security. And at least if you get that out of the way, when that board member, and they will,
Yeah, they
and
will.
that board member says, I'd like to wonder, I'd like to ask, what do we look like from a cybersecurity perspective? You know, we see all these breaches and we've got to protect us and our donors and our beneficiaries. If at least you have that assessment done, you're ahead of that you're ahead of the board a little bit. And then you can start talking about budgets and things like that and benchmarking, like I mentioned earlier. So it's a proactive, because let me tell you this, not only do you have to worry about being breached, don't think you're too small. You're in the middle of nowhere. They don't know you and they don't care. It's a numbers game. Okay. You better believe that if you get ahead of it, you're going to be in a much better place and your charity will benefit. So you start working on the budget today.
Yes.
And, you know, if you can't do it until the end of 2024, that's fine. But at least you're ahead of the game and educate yourself. And we've got a whole slew of videos here on this YouTube channel that goes through cybersecurity framework, other best practices, our philosophy on why our philosophy with working with our clients is really good. It's in our best interest as a company to make sure their investment in IT is maximized and they're as secure as the Department of Defense, Fortune 100 companies. And where does our company is designed in any engagement we have, that the fewer problems you have, the better we're off and the better you're off. So we're aligned. It's not an expense. Remember that. It's an investment. You got to start thinking about that. And then finally, one other thing that helps, I think it helps a lot of people a lot, is I want you to, for those of you that haven't gone down the cybersecurity defense road yet, you will. If you haven't gone down that road, don't think of it as adding better cybersecurity defense to your organization. I want you to start thinking cybersecurity first, and then you plug in all the IT infrastructure management and get that ROI on that investment. Make security job one.
No, that's a great point. And that's going to be a change for a lot of companies here in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, is creating that security first culture. But if anybody has any questions or interested in an assessment or any specific topics that you'd like us to touch on here in the future, feel free to reach out. I can give us a call, email. You'll be talking directly to me. And I look forward to talking to you all soon.